So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Marie Colvin Center's Hot Topic, which is focused on the future of Europe and the US elections, which are coming up very fast. And I'm really honored to have three great guests. So Professor Colleen Graffy is a former Distinguished State Department official responsible for Europe and Eurasia. And Eurasia, I should say. And she's also professor of law and director of global programs at Pepperdine University in California. And I'm also really thrilled that we've got two former visiting Colvin Center fellows. So we have Iryna Domnenko from Ukraine, and Ira now lives in Kyiv, and where she is a podcaster and also responsible for civic education programs. And Ecaterina is from Moldova, and she was a Colvin Fellow in 2022, and she works for Watchdog, which monitors and combats disinformation in her home country, where they've got elections coming up almost at the same time as we do in the US. So welcome, everybody, and I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
So, Colleen, I'm going to start with you because perhaps you're best placed as to give us the overview of what you think are the key differences between Donald Trump's foreign policy and Kamala Harris's, and why it matters so much for Europe.
Thank you very much. As you mentioned in my intro, I'm a law professor at Pepperdine Caruso Law School, that's in Malibu, California, with a campus in London. And my area of specialty is international law. So I'm the faculty advisor for the International Law Society. And one of the key things that we talk about is international world order. So I'm going to start at 35,000 feet and say that one of the key differences and what's of great concern with the US elections and why we can see it as a hinge moment in history is that the international world order that has kept the peace since the Second World War, after the Cold War, is in jeopardy because we have one candidate, Kamala Harris, and I'll speak more about her specifically if you'd like, who is very much on rules and norms. So that's my background in international law is we have treaties. You know, we have countries that sign up for treaties. We have the International Court of Justice in the based in The Hague that is looking at how do we enforce treaties, and we build up alliances. And so the international world order, where we come together globally to determine international treaties and conventions and enforcing them through the United Nations, we value and cherish that because it has kept the peace. So Kamala Harris has repeatedly stated that she is a rules and norms person. She was a deputy attorney. She was district attorney in San Francisco. She was attorney general in California. She's been prosecuting individuals, and her through line has been, the rules and norms domestically. And now, since becoming vice president, she's been very focused on the rules and norms internationally and understanding their importance. Now, Donald Trump has indicated maybe a not a clear understanding of the importance of these rules and norms. And there are sort of legions of stories where his aides have tried to explain to him the alliances and the treaties. And so, for example, NATO, that it's not a pay-to-play organization, it's an alliance with values and norms. And so he has a different view, more of a transactional view, and more of a let's focus on where the power centers are and how we align with those power centers. He seems to have a strong regard for Putin and for President Xi of China because they're strong men, and he admires that. So in our first overview of the US elections, one is definitely committed to rules and norms and the international world order, and the other is perhaps disregarding it, not recognizing its importance, or perhaps thinking that it needs to be tossed out and we need flexibility to be able to engage as and when power demands it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's a really great explanation. And Ira, let me ask you what the mood is like in Ukraine, because as Colleen was suggesting, Professor Graffy, I should say, was suggesting, Donald Trump is not a respecter of the rules-based order, but he does say he can get peace get a deal on Ukraine within 24 hours of being elected. What's the mood in your country when you have one candidate saying something like that?
In Ukraine, we are really focused on the US election, and I'm really happy to be here today, especially because this topic is really important for us. The whole society, media, politicians, they are really focused on what's going on and what will happen, because we need support from the US. And yes, you're right that when Trump says that he will make a deal really quickly with Putin in Ukraine, it makes us to be really concerned, because we know for sure, and we have been in this situation for many years, that Putin is not the man with whom any deals or arrangement work. But still, we need support from both parties in the US. We know that there will be not only presidential elections, but also the elections to the Congress. Mm-hmm. And we hope that this demand in the society, the demand to help Ukraine to win this war and to bring finally peace and to bring safety space for people in Ukraine. So we hope that this demand in the society will push both Harris and Trump to follow this demand in the society, and that the support from the US will be still possible even if Trump wins the election. But yes, we are really concerned, and I will not lie that people in Ukraine sometimes are really emotional because of because of what he says, because we are losing people, and for us it's not just a political confrontation. For us, it's a really matter of life and death. So I would explain the situation like this.
Yeah, so you put it extremely well. It also sounds like you're trying to be diplomatic. You are saying it is a matter of life and death for Ukraine and Ukrainians, but Ukraine doesn't want to burn all its bridges potentially in a 50-50 election where Donald Trump seems as likely to win as Kamala Harris. We really don't know the outcome. Is it advisable for Ukraine to keep all diplomatic channels open and not be too critical of Donald Trump at this stage?
Is that for me or for?
That was for Ira, actually. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. Yeah. I'd like to know both your views, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the matter of respect of the internal policy and the whole system of the US election system. So we are not the country, unlike Russia, which likes to be involved in the elections in other countries. We have a lot of issues to deal in our own countries. We have a lot of things to fix also, and we are more focused on our own issues and the war which is going on our territory. So yes, I think we and our diplomatic officials and our president and our members of parliament try to work with both sides, and I think it's wise, because we know there are a lot of people in the Republican Party who support Ukraine. not like supporters of Trump, but other side of the Republican Party. And I think it's matter of respect and the matter of to be open to any cases, because we need to build the relationship with the US in both cases. If Harris wins or if Trump wins, we still have the US as a country, as a power in the world, and we need to have the diplomatic relationship with this country.
So, Colleen, if I can switch over to you as a diplomat, how do you think Ira's answer would measure up?
Well, absolutely. And it was notable that when Zelensky came to the United States, and he had a bit of a misstep in that he was in Pennsylvania, he was visiting where the ammunitions were being built, kind of paying tribute to the United States contribution, but he was with Democrats. And so one of the meetings, a meeting with Trump was off the rails, and then it got on the rails. And then we all saw that the press conference with Zelensky and Trump, where Trump still sort of mentioned my good friend Putin. But it was very important that Zelensky ensured that he was back on track with Trump, because is exactly as you say, Ira, that he's going to have to do business. Whoever is the president is going to have to be dealing with these heads of state. And so it's very good that all global leaders are trying to reach out to Republicans and Democrats, because you don't know who's going to be in office. And I mentioned that my concern is, again, at 35,000 feet, the international world order. And I should mention that the reasons why I say that is that Trump has indicated that he's transactional rather than focusing on building up alliances and allies that the Harris team have made critically important. If you are focused on what Harris says is interested in foreign policy-wise, it would be good to read her Munich Security Conference speech that she gave back in February, where she focused on rules and norms and allies. But the other is that Trump is definitely of the isolationist strain of the Republican Party. And I'm a Republican, so it's very hard for me to see the Republican Party going into an isolationist strain when that was never what we were about. We were about global leadership. And then the January 6th, where we did not see a peaceful transition of power, that would be my other evidence of not focusing on the international world order and the rules and norms, and also the relationship that Trump has espoused with regard to NATO. Now, having said that, this is Trump as the candidate. And when he gets into office, it may be very different. He does not want to be seen as a loser. He does not want to be spoken of as the person that lost Ukraine. So I do think that depending on who is advising him, but also if he feels that Europe is in there, Europe has actually contributed more than the United States percentage-wise for Ukraine. Well, once he's kind of thinks these things over, he will feel Europe is pulling their weight. I don't want to be the one that lost Ukraine. And the concept of the negotiation in a day, of course, is a bit stretched. But it's clear that Putin is waiting to see who is elected to determine which way to go. And I think if Trump is elected, Putin might think that he can continue on with this. I think if Harris is elected, there might be more of a focus on how do I negotiate my way out of this. And we can talk about that later, but I just wanted to add that.
That's very interesting. And you're right that a key element of diplomacy has to be massaging Donald Trump's ego to do the right thing.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. So Ecaterina, let me bring you in, because you've got elections coming up this Sunday. The final round, I think, is just before America votes. So Moldova itself is going through the democratic process at the moment. It's also got a referendum on membership of the EU. and it has been trying to focus more towards the West. But you're on the front lines there of resisting Russian disinformation. Tell us what the atmosphere is like where you are.
Hi, yes, you're right. This Sunday we have presidential elections and the EU referendum. And actually, I think, start a little bit about the US elections and why they matter for Moldova. And that's because a strong Ukraine is extremely important for Moldova's security. We are now defended by Ukraine. That's why who gets the Oval Office is very, very important for Moldova. Now, because from these two elections, like the presidential one and the referendum one, Russia is basically more concentrated on the referendum than on the presidential elections. And this is because they know that if Moldovans, the majority of them, vote for the modification of our constitution in order to make EU an ultimate goal of Moldova's foreign policy, this will be a very strong sign from Moldovans, for the EU and for Russia, that Moldova doesn't want to be in Russian sphere of influence anymore. That's why in these elections, we witness such an amount of tools deployed by Russia that we had never ever seen. Meddling in elections is only one of them. Today, actually, EU imposed sanctions on 5 individuals that are involved and Russian-baked. Earlier in September, US also imposed sanctions on covered Russia interfering in Moldova's internal affairs. Let me try to give you a sense of what does it mean to be attacked by Russia in a hybrid war, not a conventional one. So basically, a week ago, I think, our police said that they have found a network that consisted of 130,000 people from Moldova that were recruited to influence the results of October 20th election. To bribe these people, Russians opened them bank accounts in one of the biggest Russian banks. The recruitment, as well as the management of this network, was made through the social media network Telegram. Only a few days ago, Telegram blocked more than 100 bots involved in the scheme, and this was after the request that came from our authorities. Another tool that Russia is using is the church. A big part of Moldovan church is still part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Yeah. So Kremlin recruited and paid priests to undermine elections and to spread disinformation about money. So only to sponsor that network of 130,000 Moldovans, Russia fueled like $15 million to meddle in voting. And this is only what police could document. And the real amount of money, we think, is way higher. Our estimation shows that Russia spent so far on its operations in Moldova from the start of this year, $130 million. And this is almost 1.2% from our GDP. Wow. Half of those money, like $60 to $70 million, were spent in the last 2 months, meaning in the election campaign. The biggest part were spent on paying those activists, the staff that coordinates all the operations from Moscow, including a call center that collects data, calls Moldovans, trying to convince them not to participate at the referendum or to vote no. influencers, and local proxy parties. Other costs relate to ads on Meta and Google. So basically, our data shows our monitoring team is watching the biggest part of the pages that spread disinformation. And we could document that from June to August, only on Meta, they have spent $140,000 only on ads. And we're speaking here only about those ads who are marked as social issues, because only them Meta provides the transparency, and you can see how much money they are spent on that. On the other ads that do not have this mark, Meta doesn't give you the budget, so we can only estimate.
This is just truly shocking amounts of propaganda and outright bribery really going on. What do the polls show? Do you think that a majority of Moldovans are going to support the goal of membership of the European Union in the teeth of this propaganda effort?
Well, actually, we are also making our own surveys to be sure about the data. And the last one showed that EU integration in general, as a principle, let's say, is supported by 64% of Moldovan, but only 54 are ready to say yes at the referendum. 1/3 of the people believed the narrative set by Russia that this is a political instrument, meaning the referendum is a political instrument meant to manipulate public opinion, versus 46% that consider it's a democratic exercise.
Okay.
And we think that basically our analysis says that it will be a yes vote. Now it depends if it will be a weak yes vote.
Yeah.
Or it will gather, like a big percentage and will be a thing that is recognized by the whole Moldovan society.
Yes. Yes. Professor Graffy, go.
You can say Colleen. I have a question for Ecaterina. Somewhere I'm remembering that you have to have a certain percentage of the population, but that the correct number of registered voters could be incorrect or something along that line. How might that affect things?
That's true, and that's a problem that we couldn't, manage until these elections. The thing is that in order to referendum to pass, you have to have 1/3 of Moldovans coming to the vote, to vote. Now, from that 1/3, to have a yes vote or a no vote, you have to have like 50% plus 1 vote. And then this means that the referendum passed and Moldovans have said their choice. Now, the lists of that has this election committee are way bigger than the number of Moldovans that actually live in Moldova. That's why, like today, in Moldova live 2.7 million people. In the lists, we are almost 4 million. That's why let's say three, if we talk about adult population. That's why in order to pass this referendum, at the voting stations should come at least 1 million people, around 1 million. So basically this means that half of the population that is residing in Moldova has to come and to vote. That's why one of the main messaging in this disinformation campaign coming from Russia is the boycott strategy. So they have regions as Gagauzia, for example, or the northern part of Moldova where a lot of Russian speakers live. that they are trying to convince not to come. And the other strategy is to vote no if they do come to the voting. Yeah.
So we were very interested last just over a summer ago to go to Moldova. Ecaterina took us to Gagauzia, this region, which is very much dominated by Russian propaganda and disinformation, and it did really feel like stepping back into the old Soviet Union. It was a fascinating experience. Let me ask Ira about that responsibility that rests on Ukraine, that in effect, your country at huge sacrifice and cost is holding back a Russian army. Do Ukrainians feel that responsibility for other European nations like Moldova, perhaps like the Baltic states? Or are you in such an existentialist struggle for yourself that it's hard to, take that into account, which would be very, understandable? And then, so I wanted to ask you that, but I also then wanted to come on and ask, what about Russian propaganda and disinformation within Ukraine, that it isn't just a military struggle, as I understand it as well? You're also having to deal with some of the issues that Moldova has, across multiple fronts. What do you think?
Answering your first question, yes, we are in the existential crisis, but yes, we still feel that we are in one boat with other countries which have issues with Russia. For example, Moldova or Georgia. Georgia also is going to have the election, and also Belarus and Baltic countries as well. So we feel that our battle and this war and this aggression of Russia in our territory also influence a lot the whole region, and shows that the region wants to be different, wants not to be a Russian sphere of influence, and the region wants to see how international organizations and international law changes itself and works. So this is I think it's our common desire to push back this Russian imperialism, aggressive imperialism, and start thinking of our countries as the subjects, not an objects. And yes, there are a lot of Russian disinformation as well in Ukraine. One of my friends has been to European meeting about security and about this disinformation campaign, and there was the term cognitive warfare. And I think this is really about Ukraine, cognitive warfare. So Russia wants to convince people in Ukraine that there is no other choices. So we are in the worst position ever, that our government is not a legitimate one. This is strange to hear, but yes, they try to convince us. And also the strategy of Russian disinformation operations in Ukraine is really not to create the topic, but to navigate those topics and those feelings, concerns that are already in society, and just to strengthen them, to put oil into the fire, as we say. And that's how they work. It's cheaper, it's faster. They don't need to invent anything. They just monitor and find weak places in our cognitive sphere, and they put their efforts in the weakest places.
Yes, and as a follow-up, Ira, I mean, does that sort of prey on people's feelings? There must be some feeling of war weariness as much as there is still determination in Ukraine. Is that a concern?
Could you say it again?
Yeah. Is there a feeling of war fatigue or war weariness, of
Oh,
thinking that, you know, that something's got to give?
yeah, we are really we feel fatigue, like we are exhausted most of the time, but it doesn't mean that we want um, to be invaded by Russia more and to stop fighting. So yes, there is a fatigue in the society because this is 11th year of war, but it doesn't mean that we will not fight. We will fight, we will be exhausted, but we will still fight. And for example, me, sometimes I feel, okay, I need to stop like producing content, writing, talking, and all the things because I'm so tired. But then I continue doing it without even thinking, because this is who I am. This is my life. I'm defending my day-to-day routine, not just some like abstract things like democracy or, I don't know, concept of the republic or concept of human rights. Yes, we are defending also these values, but we are also defending our everyday life. So that's why fatigue is obvious, but it does not mean that we are going to stop fighting.
Colleen, let me switch back to America on that, because that was very kind of heartening words from Ira about her own personal courage and the courage of Ukrainians. But is there a sense that Donald Trump might be winning the argument over war fatigue in America? That, you know, this idea that somehow by supporting other nations, America isn't concentrating on its own problems?
Yes, that's very much the case. It's what has been underlying the America First slogan and MAGA, Make America Great Again, is why is America spread globally as the world's policeman, blood and treasure, when look at what's happening in the United States. We have a serious border problem, immigration problem, and we're not dealing with that. And this open border is allowing fentanyl and other drugs to come in, even though they actually come through the ports. But drugs are coming through and killing hundreds and thousands of Americans. And so it really was a misstep by the Democrats to not realize what an issue the border crisis was and immigration until rather late. And it took some of that rather dramatic busing of immigrants to democratic cities that kind of got the attention of the administration. But it was a bit too late. There's work being done to recover on that, but that has been something that Trump can easily point to say, look at the problems we're having and we're not dealing with that. I would say another angle is that the Trump focuses on is that Zelensky and co are corrupt. There's corruption, and that the corruption, it's why would we support this state? They're just as corrupt as Russia. And I think that in my former job at the State Department, the public diplomacy, which is how are we communicating to the publics, I see that as kind of one of those things that really needs to be addressed, because I know the work that's happening in Ukraine and Moldova to try and stamp out corruption. And I know how incredibly difficult it is. But a lot of that message is not being heard in the United States. So it's an easy one for Trump to say, why are we spending money on this corrupt regime? And the other is that elections have been set aside. And of course, when, you know, how difficult is it to hold an election during the middle of a war when you're being invaded by your neighboring country? But still, it's a talking point that can be used by Trump to say, well, look at, Zelensky is a dictator. He hasn't held elections. He's muzzling the media. He's muzzling his opponents. And so I would encourage good lines that push back on those to get that message across. And that would go a long way for, yes, why we should try and support Ukraine.
So, Ira, if you could answer that briefly about having to push back against this narrative that's coming from Trump. But then I want to move on as well and ask Ecaterina's opinion too, because I know that oligarchs are a real problem when in Moldova and possibly Ukraine as well. But we seem to be infecting, oligarchs seem to be having a role now in American politics too. Anyway, Ira, first of all, what Colleen was saying, how to push back on this line.
Actually, these topics are not only spread by Donald Trump, but this is the topic which Russia push harder and harder. So maybe Donald Trump and his team is also influenced by this fake, I don't know, like media or something like this. I think our strategy should be to be honest. Yes, there is corruption in Ukraine, as in every country, and we see there is corruption in the European Union as the countries as well. And we are fighting this corruption. So we have the very strong opinion among civil society organizations. We have a lot of civil society organizations that are fighting for a national agency for preventing corruption to work properly, to form the boards of the main institutions that are dealing with corruption. So corruption exists, but we are fighting corruption, and I think we are more or less successful because it goes down, I think. And also about election, this is the most interesting topic, because my suggestion is to invite people who wants to have election in Ukraine right now, invite them to Ukraine, and just have a tour to the cities in Ukraine which are really close to safe, almost safe, but closer to the eastern part and to the southern part, closer to front line, and show how people live there and explain them so they will see the real life in Ukraine, and explain that this election, if they happen in Ukraine right now, they will not be fair. I mean, not like in Russia, but not be fair in regard to people who are not in Ukraine because they are refugee, who are fighting on the front line, they could not vote, who are under occupation, and also to the people who are in almost safe spaces in Ukraine. But it will be a great danger to gather a lot of people in one place, because we have seen the Ohmad strike, we have seen a lot of other strikes that Russia did to military, non-military objects. So this election will not be fair if we are thinking about people, voters, because part of them will not be able to vote, part of them will be in a great danger. So I think this is just the matter of the distance between our countries. So we need people to come to Ukraine and see with their own eyes that this is not really possible right now in Ukraine. And Zelensky is definitely not a dictator. Our civil society is really strong, and we are not going to let anyone to be a dictator in Ukraine. We did it with Yanukovych. We will do it again with anyone who will even think of becoming a Tsar or dictator in Ukraine.
Colleen, you're dying to jump
just
in there.
One little bit is, might there be a statement with opposition candidates, potential opposition leaders, or parliament to have a statement to say, we all agree that elections cannot be held under the current circumstances?
You mean like official statement?
Yeah, that's by the parliament and that is bipartisan, that is stating we all agree, those that are, in power and who potentially would like to be in power, we all agree the circumstances are such that we cannot hold elections at this time.
I think there were some comments from the officials saying this. I think there was not a parliamentary official statement somewhere in the official website, but I'm not sure. I need to check. I think it could be done, but I don't think that
I think that
will,
would be, I think that would be really powerful, because then when it's raised, and it's raised all the time, you say, look, here is a joint statement from Parliament, from the likely opposition politician, saying, for these reasons, we can't register voters, we can't reach voters, we don't have mail opportunity, we can't mail, the postal system is not effective, and we don't know where people are internationally. And for that reason, until Putin withdraws his forces, or in the at least for this election cycle, it's not doable.
Let me bring in Ecaterina now, because Ecaterina, I remember when visiting Moldova, you talked a lot about the corruption there that was coming to a large extent from pro-Russian people and oligarchs. Just wonder what you have to say, first of all, about the corruption issue. And then we seem to be having similar difficulty in the US, where we have people like Elon Musk, a big Silicon Valley entrepreneur and oligarch, putting his thumb on the scale through his platform X, which used to be Twitter. So are you seeing similar patterns? I remember you did a brilliant paper once on comparing what Tucker Carlson said and what Vladimir Putin said. It was a spot the difference, and you couldn't spot the difference, basically. What do you have to say about this?
Yes, exactly. And I totally agree with what Ira said about what is the line of Trump about why Ukraine is corrupt and about election. This is exactly the same messaging that Putin is pushing, not the first year, but since the invasion, definitely. Nothing changed here. On another point is, I don't understand how can he do elections on the occupied territories, and how this result of a supposed election can count as a fair one. So that's one thing about corruption in Moldova. We started justice reform. It's going way slower than we would need to. That's true. On another hand, the biggest oligarchs that Moldova had fled the country once the pro-democratic party came into power, and all of them now aligned to Kremlin's efforts to undermine democracy in Moldova. And this is absolutely explainable, because this is the only way they could return in Moldova. They still have their people between prosecutors, judges, and so on. That's why a lot of cases that they are implied in are not finalized till today. So this is basically their strategy. Their oligarchs' goal and the Kremlin's goal is the same. That's why they're working together. And about presidential elections that are going to be held on this Sunday. So basically we have two candidates, pro-democratic ones. One is Maia Sandu, that is the current president, and another one is Octavian Tsiku, that has no chances of winning the office. And on another side, we have 9 candidates backed by Russia with support of oligarchs.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Now, I'm actually running already over time, but there are some important issues I just want to address. Particularly, Colleen, you mentioned that if Kamala Harris won the election, you thought that this would change the calculus by Putin. Can you tell us more about what you think will happen if Kamala Harris becomes president?
Yes, and I might start by addressing some of the comments that have been made earlier with regard to Russia and using these manipulations and propaganda. When Kamala Harris was sworn in as U.S. Senator in January 2017, that was when, if you remember, all of the U.S. intelligence agencies had this breaking story about evidence of Russian interference in the US elections. So that was the first thing to hit her. It wasn't that Trump had colluded with Russia. It was that Russia had been interfering in the 2016 election for Trump and to damage Hillary Clinton. And then Kamala Harris decided to sign up for the Intelligence Committee and the Homeland Security Committee to serve on. She was actually warned against serving on the intelligence committees because 80% of the committee hearings are behind closed doors. And Sarah, you'll understand this as a politician. They want to be in front of the cameras. They want to have the newspapers there. But she decided that she really wanted to dig into the intelligence side. So she's better prepared probably than anyone to understand the malign influence of Russia in the elections. And so she has been focused on the China and Huawei, Russian propaganda. She was also focused when she was Attorney General in California on the vulnerability of our voting system. So she's very focused on that just for the state of California because we don't have a centralized voting system, but to recognize those vulnerabilities, AI, cyber attacks, and quantum computing over the horizon threats that are happening. So I think she's going to have the Cold War instilled knowledge of foreign policy from President Biden, who she's been serving under now for going on 4 years. And so she'll have, and Biden really, aside from George H.W. Bush, has probably one of the greatest foreign policy experience as a president. So she's had mentoring under him, but she's also been thrown into this cutting edge of propaganda and cybersecurity and cyber warfare. So I think that bodes well. So if she becomes president, of course, she has Putin's number. So I don't think there's going to be a reset with Russia as Hillary Clinton tried to do. And I don't think she'll have the idea that Putin, somehow you can negotiate and stop the war in one day, as Trump is suggesting. However, I do think that there will be a focus on how we can negotiate. And by that, it would be, can we, and this, of course, is going to have to be up to Ukraine, but might Ukraine say, we keep some borderline situation just so that we can survive, build the economy, get Ukrainians back into Ukraine, build our military capabilities independently, join the EU, join NATO. And I think if there was a negotiated temporary settlement, this would allow Ukraine to join NATO. And I think back to Finland, how long did Finland have that disputed border, and other countries? But eventually, at least Finland kept their independence. And I think the same thing for Ukraine. What can be done from a position of strength in order to put Ukraine in a position to join the EU and to join NATO? Sorry, Sarah, that was a bit long.
No, I wonder what Ira thinks of that. What's your answer to that? It's short of full military victory for Ukraine.
And I would prefer full military victory, but I'm just looking at what we know are the situation.
Yeah, we also prefer full military victory because for us it's not only the territorial conflict, but this is the matter of people under occupation who are suffering, who are tortured, So basically, this is not a war for territory. Russia has a lot of kilometers. Russia is 28 times bigger than Ukraine. So they don't need a territory. They need to erase Ukrainians as a nation and to show the rest of the countries around Russia that they will be next. And you mentioned Finland. Yes, of course, they had this issue with Russia as well. And that's why they wanted to join NATO so badly. And we also want to join NATO because we think that this is the only way to prevent Russia from attacking us. But unfortunately, if we throw the front right now, it is possible that we will not have enough time before Russia attack again to join NATO or EU, because this is a long process. Joining EU and NATO, this is even more complicated process because of some NATO members who are not really pro-Ukrainian to join NATO. So for us, the best scenario is to prevent Russia from striking Ukraine. I mean, like, to destroy their military objects, to destroy missiles before they take off, to destroy missiles on the stage of manufacturing, for example, preventing Western countries' electronics and other things to end up in Russian missiles, to check more effectively these chains of supplies, and also to prevent, like, to fight this aggressive imperial mindset and prevent people who think they might have right to invade other countries from doing this, because we need to stop this at the very, like, at the point when there is only the idea of Russians, they have legitimate right to invade someone, not only Ukraine. Yeah. And I think a lot of even Russians, I mean, these small nations oppressed inside Russia as a federation, they are also willing to have the right for freedom. So for us, this is a fight for not for territory, and we want to. We appreciate all the support which we received from our partners all over the world, and the US in particular. But we think that we have to win this war with the military forces, and we need more courage from our partners to let us do this, because Russia is escalating already. So this is not a matter of, you know.
When I hear from Colleen and from Ira, is different races against time in a way, because, you know, we've got our US elections coming up. We don't know which way it's going to go. We also don't know which way Western European nations are going. We're seeing pretty impactful Russian propaganda all over the West. Actually, we're seeing the rise of the AfD in Germany. We're seeing, you know, a far-right party in Austria winning the popular vote. You know, there are a lot of different moving jigsaws. I think I'm going to give the last word, believe it or not. I'm going to give it to Ecaterina, because it seems to me Moldova is actually a country that is moving forwards towards the European Union, maybe one day towards NATO. That seems a long way off. But coming from Moldova with all its challenges, do you feel that maybe things can still go in the right direction, that there can be progress in this world where there are so many checks and balances to people's dreams? Oh, you're muted, Ecaterina.
Now good. Yes, this is exactly what we feel. And this is why this referendum is so important for us. Moreover, we think that now Moldova is a kind of a testing ground for hybrid warfare, in which Russia is testing its different types of tools that it might deploy in other countries as well if they are going to succeed here. That's why for us it's very important to win this hybrid war, to develop tools that will be suitable for other countries and that will be efficient. Because maybe Russia will be not in the position to military attack EU countries or the US, but it will definitely try to do different types of informational operations, psychological operations, and so on. That's why we hope that we will get through it. and we could share this knowledge to other countries, even though what we see now is that many of them do not understand the extent of it, and that they are targeted today.
I think that's right. And so, Ira, we wish you all the best in Ukraine. You are really holding up all of Europe there, and thank you for that. And yes, so it's so good to have your perspective as well, Ecaterina. And Colleen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This has been a fascinating discussion. I'm going to sign off now on behalf of the Colvin Center. Thank you, Professor Graffy from Pepperdine University, former State Department official. Thank you, Ecaterina from Moldova, from Watchdog, an organization combating disinformation and propaganda. And thank you, Ira from Ukraine, a civic educator and podcaster. What a great discussion this has been. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.